Welcome to MFP Live. I'm Donna Ladd, the editor and the co-founder of the Mississippi Free Press. And as always, my co-host and co-founder, the publisher of the Mississippi Free Press, Kimberly Griffin, is here tonight.
Hello, hello, hello.
And so tonight we're really excited. We're going to kind of continue the conversation that we've been having over recent months, particularly around the reporting project that we're doing in a collaboration with the Jackson Advocate. And the name of the project is Inequities and Resilience, Black Women, Systemic Barriers in COVID-19. And we've had some remarkable stories come out. Just in the last few weeks, we've started dropping our Hinds County focus. We had done the Knoxville focus before, as many of you know. And now we're doing the Hinds County focus. And the focus area within Hinds County is crime and violence. And so Aaliyah Veal is the lead reporter on this particular county. Aaliyah grew up in Hinds County, went to Jackson Public Schools, went off, got a fancy master's degree, and went to Spelman, went to the Newmark J School in New York City. And she's back and doing some really incredible work. And recently we published her overview. And our overviews in this project, they're deep dives, but I really encourage everybody to read every word because they really set up the problem that we're addressing. And in this particular case, Aaliyah kind of zooms in on a mother who had lost her son. And very often the violence conversation in Jackson and Mississippi is not framed around families losing their children. Right? It's framed around something very different and much more punitive and finger pointing and some various other things that I have a feeling we'll talk about tonight. So then part of this story, Aaliyah met Pauline Rogers, who is our guest here tonight. Hello, Pauline.
Hi.
And Pauline, and she's going to tell you a whole lot more about her story than I possibly could, but I'll set it up for y'all. Aaliyah did a profile of Pauline, who is formerly incarcerated, and we'll talk about that, and who now runs a nonprofit organization called the RECH Foundation. And she'll tell you about the goals of that, but it's very related to the topics that we're talking about here tonight. And Aaliyah did this profile that's on the screen right now of Pauline. It's got some gorgeous photos by Acacia Clark, by the way. And kind of zooming in on Pauline's life. And, you know, I knew some of your story, Pauline, but it wasn't really until I read this profile that I really understood the layers of your story. So we're tickled to have you here tonight. Thank you for being here to talk about this very urgent topic. And I think what I want to open it up with is just giving you the opportunity to talk a little bit about what you think people know about, need to know about who you are, where you grew up. Just kind of set the landscape for our viewers tonight, if you will.
Thank you for having me, and Kimberly, I'm glad to be here with MFP.
Pauline, I don't know if you're talking, but I think that it's frozen. Is everybody else seeing that?
Yeah, it looks like she's frozen. While we are, Donna, maybe while we are trying to get her back, maybe she can give the details, but maybe you can talk a little bit about what happened from the story, what you remember, what happened to her as a child, and I can throw in and talk a little bit about Black trauma and how trauma is often dealt with. And I also think probably in rural, I think it may be Southern. I mean, just this idea that trauma is swept under the rug, that not all communities have the capacity to deal with it. And I mean, I'm not sure we are completely, I think generationally we're farther than we ever were when you think about my cousins and stuff coming back from a war versus my uncles coming back from a war versus my cousins coming back from a war. It was a very different expectation of what kind of resources they would have. And I don't know what you've experienced. I think Todd says she's coming back.
Is she coming back?
Yeah, he said she's here. Oh, hey, Pauline.
Hi, I'm sorry. I got kicked out. This has not happened before. I'm in this new Zoom and streaming world, but hey.
But everybody forgives us too, because it's this virtual Zooming world. So it happens. Don't worry about it. We take it all in stride. If a cat attacks me tonight, we'll take it all in stride.
Well, thank you. I really don't know what happened, but I was saying I'm a little country girl. Van Cleve, Mississippi, typical family. When I say typical country, typical African-American, typical poor raised girl. I'm the oldest of 11. I came from a 2-parent family. I never saw physical abuse in my family. I always knew that we were packing up, leaving, going to aunties and uncles, but I never physically saw why. I heard loud talking, but I didn't see anything. And then one night I saw something. I am the oldest of 11. My mother's a devout Christian. Everybody went to church. And so my mother killed my father one night in self-defense. I watched and witnessed that, and I got stuck in that place of trauma, spiraling down. My grandmother always told me it was my duty and responsibility to help with my younger siblings. I took that literally and began to do whatever I could to support my family. And therein, I would figure out what was my role. How do I support no job, a child? And I was a church girl, so we always had funerals, weddings, whatever. So I came up with this deceptive plot to attend every funeral that I could with my siblings dressed, not to go grieve with bereaved families, but to get to the repast where there was always food. And back over in the 60s, you could easily leave with a whole pan of bread, casseroles, meats, etc. And the more siblings I had, the more food we got. And that landed me in the prison system. But backing up, I don't think that my father, looking back at it, had to die, because in that rural town, to this date, still is not a healthcare facility that could have aided my mother more quickly into getting him to the hospital. She had to drop the other 10 siblings off somewhere, off with another family member, while she attempted to get him to the hospital. And so that's how my life with incarceration started.
So you talk about, when I was reading about the funeral ploy, I thought that's ingenious, is what I thought, even though it was a ploy. I thought, my goodness, what kid follows that train of logic all the way through to you look the part, you got there. I remember, I was like, gosh, that's a smart kid. You talk about being stuck in that place of trauma and subterfuge to help your siblings, and stealing so that you could be normal. When you talk about the pajamas, tell us a little more about, because I don't think people have an understanding of what it feels exactly like to be on the outside of what seems normal for everybody else's family. My mother did not grow up poor, but she had made a decision in her life that rich people had a lot of coats. She had a coat, but she says, and it created an obsession about coats, And so tell us that pajama story, because I thought that was so intriguing.
I grew up watching the old classical movies. Lana Turner, to date, still remains one of my favorite actresses. And, there was always this elegance that was around her. They always changed clothing. They had dinner clothes. They had bed clothes. And so we just had clothes. And they had to be clean clothes or dirty. They were either clean clothes or dirty clothes. But we did have church clothes. We had church shoes and school shoes. Church shoes just meaning the ones that were less worn out. And so it was important to me that, I got tired of sleeping at night in clothes that we had to get up and wash. And I wanted to feel normal. That felt abnormal to me, having to sleep like what I didn't see on television, because that was our model, was what we saw on television. We weren't surrounded. We're talking a rural community. So it wasn't like you looked out in the neighborhood and you saw your other surroundings and they looked a different way. The model was what you saw on television. And so I wanted to model what I saw on television as normal. And so that's what I attempted to do, was to model what the normal life of a person looked like. And the only way I could do it was coming up with, funerals. I knew church. I didn't have a vote in whether I went to church or not. So therein again was my model for, well, what do I do to respond to help with 10 other siblings? And so everything that I knew came from what was done in church. There was always eating going on, or there was always sewing going on. And so I attempted to replicate those things that ended up leading me into prison, into shoplifting. My brother got tired of me taking scissors and cutting his hair. And so I would steal clippers, and there we were. There I was, rather.
Pauline, I was thinking about, when I read this profile, I was thinking about another story that I had written when I was still working for the Jackson Free Press, which is a story called A Hunger to Live. And it's about young men in the Washington edition, who at that point, this was several years ago, and they were working with John Knight before John became doing the stuff that he's doing now with the Strong Arms of Jackson. But the reason I bring that up is to say that I had written about, and I feel like understood to the extent that I could, the many reasons that young people go toward crime, and then that can lead to violence. But it really wasn't until I spent time with these young men where I really their stories really helped me understand the depth of what hunger can do. Right? I mean, they were being, and so when you're talking about hunger and stealing the food from the church, there are a lot of people who have enough to feed their kids, and then some, often, who aren't exactly trying to step into those shoes. And so when these young people were telling me their stories, and it's in this story in the Jackson Free Press, where, they're having honey buns for dinner, or, Mr. Stamps at Stamps Burgers over on the other side of Jackson State from where I am, I should say, would give them food. Other people would give them food. And so, so just to kind of put a fine point on this whole thing, and I feel like your story tracks with it so well, because you had a hunger to live too. You had a hunger to help feed the people around you, right? And then even one of these young men I interviewed, he wanted, in third grade, he and his friends wanted a computer like other kids had computers, because they saw those pictures, or they'd see, images. And so they broke into the elementary school when they were in the third grade. And then he tells a story where how mean the corrections folks were to them when they took them to the juvenile detention center and locked them up and said, no one's ever coming to get you when you're in the third grade. And so, so I don't know. I just want you to talk more about what, I guess, if there is a question there, you take it anywhere you want, but it's, what do people need to understand about young people who get on these kind of tracks toward crime? What do a lot of people don't know that you could help us understand?
I think a lot of people don't know is in every child, that seemingly looks okay is screaming out some need, some unmet need that people are missing. I think about the recent suicides in the Miss USA. There is something that was missed, that people are always telling stories. It's just we don't listen well enough sometimes, and we miss what was tossed at us. Because I was always crying out. Or if a child lies, when kids tell lies, most of the times the hidden thing is attention. We're seeking attention. Can you hear me? Can you see me? If I'm not combing my hair, it may be because I want you to pay me. Sometimes when we're fully dressed, no one sees that I'm torn up on the inside because I look seemingly put together on the outside. So a lot of times when you see kids don't want to brush their teeth, it's a cry out for help. And I've been there where I refused to look decent because I wanted somebody to ask me a question so that I can have a conversation. And a lot of times that never happened.
Pauline, listening to that, it makes me think of people then who will say it's all about the parents, that the parents it's the parents' fault, right? And sometimes they're talking about parents who work 3 jobs, but it's the parents' fault. How do you respond to that? I'm curious.
I respond to that by primarily agreeing with a lot of it. A child don't care about the kind of car they drive. All a child wants is their mother's lap, their mother's hug, their mother's attention at all costs. When you're a child, you don't know about what it takes to get a home. Wherever mom is, in the car sleeping, on the sofa sleeping, you just want to be with mom. And you wonder why sometimes children can be physically abused and want to go back to mom in an abusive situation. It's because we have this dysfunction of what we think real love is. But I do believe that a lot of it is, and know that a lot of it is parents' lack of or overindulgence of. A lot of parents are forfeiting their parenting based on the knowledge of the kids. Example, you got older parents or grandparents that are raising children who are technologists equipped and smart. Well, that doesn't make you relinquish your parental skills that just because I'm an old fogey grandma and I don't know computer. That doesn't make you smarter than grandma. That doesn't make you more knowledgeable than grandma. That wisdom of grandma is what you need based over 1 + 1 = 2. Grandma can tell you how to make 1 + 1 = 5, to tell you the truth. So the math is not just based on the scientific. 1 + 1 literally is 2. But mom can take, or dad can take that 1 + 1 and make it 5. And you wonder, how did we get from 1 to 5? When we had nothing. So now where did the 1 come from? Meaning how they can take a bag of rice and stretch food when you saw nothing in the refrigerator is what my math is referring to. How it doesn't make sense. And children just want to know that mom can feed me. We want to eat whatever mom eats and be with mom at all costs. And one thing that I wanted always was my mom, my grandmother, at all costs. I didn't care about work. I didn't care about no outfit. I wanted mom more than that. And the kids today want the same thing, but parents are relinquishing that. And so you got the parents now are TikTok, the TikTok daddy, the Instagram mama, the Facebook daddy. So you're going to get mom and dad from somewhere, but who is the parent? And so the parents now are the social media platform are parenting the children. Google is parenting the children. When they want to know, well, what color do I want? Google can know. Google and the social media platform can give you a profile of your child that you don't even know, living under the same roof with them. Facebook can give you a whole profile of your child. And if you ask Mom, what's my favorite color? Well, I don't know. But if you ask Google, Facebook, they can spit out a whole profile. Well, you like your hair this way. You like this type of jewelry. You like this style. Because they're profiling us every single day. And parents don't know who we are.
Let's maybe we're shifting back, but let's talk about, because you talk about in our story, I read about some of your interactions with law enforcement, one of which was positive, whether when you were a really young kid, the officer gave you a pep talk and some spending money and either took you home or sent you on your way. Tell us what you eventually ended up being incarcerated for a longer period of time for.
I ended up, the first arrest was a police officer. I had shoplifted, and the policeman came, arrested me, put me in handcuffs, took me to the car, and went back in the store. Of course, I don't know what's going on. Then he came back to the car. He took the handcuffs off. I'm still in the back of the car. But he talked to me all the way home, driving me. And I thought, well, this looks for me. I'm going. And he took me home, gave me a pep talk all the way home. When I got home, he gave me $7. That was all he had in his pocket. And he told me that I never had to do that. I always find somebody that I could talk to or find a police officer. And that was my first experience with being arrested and not getting arrested. But I didn't learn a lesson that first time. So I shoplifted again. Then I shoplifted again. On that third shoplifting time, I was in Sears and Roebuck. I got sentenced as a habitual offender. And that's what landed me facing a 6-year prison term when I went to prison. Well, politicians back then literally came to the prisons and visited. And when I was there, the late William Winter, and then the governor after him, I don't remember what, Mavis or whichever one, came, and I ended up serving a little over half of that prison term. But I went to prison for stealing.
You went to prison for shoplifting, and what were you shoplifting? And maybe give us some feedback on when that first good officer picked you up. How old were you, and kind of where you? Because I think
the first one, I think I was 11 years old, maybe 12, when the first arrest. And then some years down the road, I was a teenager. And then in my mid-20s was when mid-20s, early 30s, when I actually went to prison for shoplifting, clippers, again, pajamas, I think some tote bags, maybe some shoes, that landed me in prison. And these were items. Now, don't get me wrong. In some of the times that I shoplifted, I didn't get caught where I was just benefiting and shoplifting things because I wanted to look good. I wanted to look like Hollywood. I wanted to look like this, whatever. So I was shoplifting a lot of things that I never got caught for. But what I actually got caught for when I went to prison was a pair of clippers. My brother got tired of me cutting his hair, and he wanted to learn how to cut hair. So I went and stole a professional clipper set for him to learn how to cut his hair. And I'm sorry I get full when I think about that to this day. When I see children, no child wants to be dirty. No child wants to look unkept. No child wants to be without a coat. No child wants to be without a blanket. And it's the things like that we need to do on the front end to offset incarceration. And a lot of the crime that is happening now, even in the city of Jackson and all over this country, a lot of it is not just bad kids seeking to do wrong. Some of it is simply bad laws that lawmakers have got to take a responsibility in bad laws that we're putting on the book. A law for this, a law for that. Bad laws meaning stand your ground. Well, stand your ground, give permission to anybody to just shoot if you think you got a reason to shoot. Or open carry law. Well, open carry means let's openly carry. So we have got to take some responsibility. And I'm just using those as an example, not necessarily saying those are bad, but I'm saying when you put these laws out, you have got to ask yourself the long haul, what can occur? If everybody's doing this and everybody has a right, well, where is the wrong?
Now, I want to put a fine point on a couple things you said, just in case it got past people. You were handcuffed for shoplifting when you were 10, 11?
11, I was.
Okay. Handcuffed for shoplifting when you were 11. I just want to say that again. Now, I'm not exactly sure how old you are, Ms. Rogers, but I could tell you that growing up in the state of Mississippi, I have known of many young white people who were caught shoplifting, who were never handcuffed and were caught more than once and did not go to prison. Okay. I just want, I just feel like I have to put that fine point here for people. Because,
Caught doing a lot more than shoplifting.
Well, a lot more than shoplifting. Oh yeah. And let's just be honest, people who bought their kids off of massive drug charges. I'm aware of some of those things as well, and some dirty DAs and all those things. So, I mean, it doesn't stop with shoplifting. But kind of what I want to say to people is, it was kind of a device in John Grisham's book, A Time to Kill, but it was a device where could you close your eyes? If you're white, could you close your eyes and think of this being your kids that were caught shoplifting and then end up in prison for 6 years? I'm not saying it's okay to shoplift. I mean, I think I probably shoplifted at least once as a kid, because everybody else was doing it. Cops didn't catch me. I was too smart. No, I'm just kidding. But I don't know. I just want people to look at that. And remember, I mentioned already, a third grader who broke into an elementary school and was treated very harshly by police. And it's one of the precursors for young people committing worse violence as adults, in addition to dropping out of school, is also coming into a negative experience like that with police, and that becomes kind of part of the arc of who they are or however it affects them. And that's research based. So I kind of want people to really think about that, because if you throw the book at somebody for shoplifting, you may be setting them up to commit worse violence later on, right? And so you went to prison. Where were you in prison?
At Central Mississippi Correctional Facility in Pearl. They had just built that facility in 86. So I had remained in the county jail until they constructed their facility, because they didn't want to move the women that were going to prison from the county jail to Parchman and then have to move us back from Parchman. So they just kept us detained us in the county jail until that facility was finished. Now,
I'm curious, in the county jail, was that on the coast?
On the coast.
Okay.
At the adult detention center in Pascagoula is where I was.
How long were you in that detention center before you went to prison?
82 to 84. And when they constructed that in 86, because I stayed a year and a half actually at Central Mississippi. When I got there in 86 to Central Mississippi, I got out in 89. So 86? So I stayed that much time at Central.
And then how long had you been in jail before that in the detention center?
For the arrest, maybe 30 days.
Okay. So it wasn't one of these really long, we see here in the county jail.
No.
Well, I would like you to, and then I'll kick it back to Kimberly after this, but talk a little bit about what prison was like for a woman, particularly.
Culture shock.
I bet.
All I knew about prison is what I had seen on television. And I had geared up my mind to endure the rape because that's what I saw on television that happened to people. And I just told God, if you let me go, if you save my life and take me to a place that I can just endure the rape and let me live, then I'll be okay. Well, I was never raped in prison. But when I got there, I certainly was in culture shock because I was like, where are all of your families? There were people everywhere, women everywhere, young, old, poor, black, white, everywhere. And some of them had made parole and could not leave because they did not have a verifiable address where they could leave. And that's where the big idea came in my head that I'm going to fix this. My grandmama always told me to do something. You see a problem, you do something. You fix it. My mother and grandmother. So, that's where this came from. But it was horrific. Although it was a newly constructed facility, the food that you see that was seen in the inhumane conditions in Parchment, it was there at CMCF. And so it was very real and traumatic. And there is nobody that ever goes to prison and come out the same, whether you stayed overnight, 5 years, 2 years, 3 years. The classification part, the entering in of the prison is traumatic. They go through every cavity of your body. And the person that classifies you in prison is just as good as the non-corruption that's inside that individual. They lift your eyelid. They're digging under your eyelid, in your nose, in your ear, in your mouth. Just every cavity, vaginal area, rectal area. They are, and some of them would just, it looked like it would go on for minutes, extended minutes. And it was just violation at its ultimate for every single person, male and female, that goes through the prison system are traumatized and need healing when they get out.
Let's talk a little bit about what your foundation does and how you got started and where you are today, because I think we talk about people being left in systems. We know a lot about folks being left in foster care and not having anywhere to go at the end of leaving foster care. But until I sort of thought about it, but it never occurred to me that you can't get out of prison if you can't explain where you're going.
You can't just explain it.
Somebody's gotta have paperwork.
The parole investigator has to tangibly, physically go to the address where you're going to, talk to the person at that address, and verify that you have consented and you have to sign, whoever that person is, when the investigator comes, that this is an approved address. You can't just say it. You can't just throw that address in there and say, well, I'm coming to Miss Ladd's, or Miss Ladd said I can come there, Miss Griffin said I can come, and this is the address. It doesn't work like that. It's investigated. It's investigated and it's turned in to the case manager and the parole board before you are released.
Wow. And tell us how you decided that you would be a solution to this problem, and tell us about your foundation and how you got started and where you are right now.
There's a little girl that was a little girl before I ever went to prison that's still inside this big girl. And in every big girl that exists now is still that little girl who wanted to be a lawyer, a grant writer, a news writer, a journalist, and a Miss America, and a Miss USA, and a doctor. When children are saying that, they are very serious when they say they want to be 5 things in one sentence. They are serious when they say it. But then here come us, the experts, dream killers. Oh, just pick one thing and do that.
That's right.
Serious. And so I was in prison, and when I heard that, I was like, I'm gonna fix this, because I'm a church girl, and my pastor always said you could be whatever you wanted to be. My grandmother, you could be whatever you wanted to be. You could do whatever you wanted to do. Well, my dream growing up, I wanted to be a lawyer and a politician. My sweet, loving, devout Christian grandmother, who always told me I could be whatever I wanted to be, was dead set against me being a lawyer and a politician, because her experience with lawyers on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, they were crooked, they were low down white men who took the property of poor Black people. And that was her experience with a lawyer, and she never wanted me to be a lawyer. And my favorite politician growing up as a child was Trent Lott. He used to come sit down and shell peas under the carport with my grandmother with his starched white shirts on. And I thought, that's what I'm going to do when I be up. If you can sit down and do this and look like that, that's what I wanted to do. But that didn't happen. She wanted me to be a nurse. I didn't want to be a nurse because I related that to being, changing diapers of old people all day, feeding them and keeping their mouth, from drooling. Because we took care of every single person in my family. Nobody went to home. So that's where the big idea came from in prison. On the benches, listening to women, hearing women cry at night, nowhere to go, grandmothers who I wished I had them at home to take care of them. I thought I was going to do something about that. And that's where the big vision and idea came, that I was going to do that. And so I just started hot air, like I'm blowing out hot air now, speaking it in the atmosphere, and then just started writing it down on paper that I was going to do it. And that little lady that's scrolling in that picture there that I worked for when I was in prison, Wendy Hatcher, meant to me. And I'm sorry, I got a little fool seeing her picture, because she just passed away right before Thanksgiving last year. I took care of her. She lived in the home that I named in her honor until she passed away this past Thanksgiving. Her children allowed me to take care of her, because I told her when I was in prison that when I got out, I was going to name a home in her honor. And then if I ever kept my life, strength, and sound mind, she would never go in a nursing home as long as I breathed. And her children granted me that. And they moved her into the home. And she stayed here over a year and passed away. She mentored me when I was in prison. She broke the rules when she was working for DOC. When I got out, I moved with her, lived with her, started to work, not because I had a house. I had an extra room in an apartment that I was renting, and a lady got out of prison and needed, and I let her live there, and I just continued to do it. Fast forwarding some decades later, we have acquired 27 acres of land with 5 homes. 2 are operable, with the vision to continue to work despite all the odds that I'm faced with, because everybody deserves another chance. And every time I see people in prison, I don't see murderers, rapists. I see childhood trauma, childhood hurt and pain that never got dealt with as a child. And as I'm speaking, it's not the case, but I have learned that one of the guys that was arrested for killing the pregnant girl is a cancer victim, and he's had cancer since he was 4 years old. But all we see is him plastered on television, and he killed this baby. And I seek to find out and dig deeper in the why somebody was there, what happened, what caused you. And he is the epitome of a lot of stories of children and the things they suffered growing up that never got dealt with. And we keep tossing them away. Every child wants to meet somebody big and important. Everybody wants to meet a Donna Ladd, but we shift the children away. Everybody wants to meet a Kimberly Griffin, but we're so important, we're so big that we don't have time to bend over and put a child in our lap. And every child just wants a lap. They want an ear. They want a hug. Regardless, sometimes we're so clean, we can't take the time to rub the dirt off of or the snot off a child's nose. And that's all children want, just know somebody cares and that they're paying us some attention. And being a Mississippi girl, I just want to be one of those people. I got a lady that I picked out of prison a short while ago. And I saw where she had gone back to prison several times. And I was like, well, why? And I found out, and I didn't just find out. I heard a whisper, a silent whisper, that said that this girl did it and she went back to prison intentionally. And I asked her and she agreed. She was living in abandoned homes because no family support, no friend support. And so the best thing for her to do was to go back to prison and not register as a sex offender, just to go back to prison because it was better, because there was a meal, there was a place to live. And we got so many problems in our criminal justice system that we need to fix. And they go back to poverty and undealt childhood problems that we keep attaching these adult punitive measures to resolve them, and they're not being fixed.
Talk a little bit, because I think we underestimate what trauma does to people, even when you've had a pretty good life, right?
I did.
What you talk about being stuck, in that place. And it sounds to me like you've done a lot of work, talked a lot, got a lot of help, worked through a lot of it. What resources could you have used after you witnessed this traumatic event in your childhood?
Counseling, mental health counseling. And in the Black community, especially back in the 60s, you didn't admit that. You didn't say you didn't say you were crazy. You didn't say you were this. And we don't face problems like they're facing. We pass them on. Even before the prison system got big, if we had a troubled child, especially in the Black community, we didn't just pick up the phone and call the police. We checked out grandmama to see if grandmama could fix him. If grandmama couldn't do nothing, we passed him to auntie, auntie to uncle, uncle to cousin, cousin to another sibling. If they didn't do that, they went to Chicago to another aunt, to get resolved. We tried every resource before we ended up saying, I don't know what to do with it, rather than seeking professional help. And there's professional help now available, but we have this culture that's been created for us that I don't know how we break it, other than we need to do it one person at a time. If that one person is me, is to just tell our stories. It's okay to say I'm not okay.
Yeah, and we're both Mississippians and probably grew up in very similar families. And it wasn't until I was probably 4 years old where I realized why some people were sent to Chicago, right? Or Cleveland in my case, or sent or passed around. You weren't quite sure why they kept moving around in the family. And then you start asking questions, and you thought, well, if I could have told my doctor better information about my family history of mental health issues, perhaps I would have gotten. And so you create this systematic problem where even when you do have the resources, you don't have the information, let alone, because you start asking questions, and we found out that two of my great uncles were institutionalized at where UMC is now. They just disappeared, and I don't think their sisters knew where they were. Like when we found the records, and nobody ever talked about them, and they disappeared off of every piece of a family tree. And so when you don't uncover that baggage, and you're not being honest, because you're embarrassed and you don't want people to think badly, like you've done something wrong as a parent or a grandparent or a family member. But it's so interesting, and I say all that to say that we, as now the elders, I'm an elder, oh my goodness, in my family, oh, now I have to process that. Got to start telling the truth too, to give the other generations the tools they need to have to work through their own trauma, and also some of the systematic issues that have been happening in not systematic in the right word, generational issues, right, issues that are being passed down to us without us even knowing.
And see, for me, more than, or in addition to, should I say, critical race theory, In our communities, we need to have critical fact telling in our critical storytelling in our families.
Ooh, tell the truth.
Because and I had to deal with that. I had to learn that, all these children weren't moms and daddies. This here was Mr. So-and-so child here in the family. And when I discovered that, and I had went through some hard times with my family, that I refused to let this generational stuff disrupt my life. And I had to tell some tough stuff, some hard stuff, and get it backed up. Siblings, family members that were struggling in their sexuality. Am I L? Am I G? Am I B? Am I Q? Am I I? Am I A? Or am I all of it? Then you find out decades later, well, great-great-grandma was married and had a lady on the side. What? But we don't tell these stories. And then these children walk around with these struggles, feeling like freaks of nature, or freaks of, I came through some kind of ancient or another planet vaginal delivery, or cesarean delivery. I came from another world. We make them feel like freaks of nature when all we need to do is have tough conversations. We have got to learn to talk to our children and friends about bad things in a good way. Bad things in a beautiful way, meaning put some honey on it. It's gonna be a rough ride, but we got to talk about this. And we keep missing that. And therein we have a prison system full of people who trying to smoke their way out, drink their way out, sex their way through it, cut their way out of it. You cut it off of them. You cutting, you slicing, you dicing. And I ran into some of them out. They're cutting themselves. They're trying to get rid of the pain. And nothing can anesthetize when all you need is a hard conversation. Mm-hmm. Or some of it is to tell your children, I'm sorry. I was messed up. I was abused. And because I went through that, I did my own work. I had a conversation with my mother at 69 years, when she was 69 years old. She told me like it was yesterday of this man sitting her in his lap and molesting her at 69 years old. She wept as if she was a little girl. And I had to take my mother and wrap her head in my bosom to ease her pain. And so it's like, these stories. So we've got to have tough conversation in order to heal our children, in order to heal our communities. Because we're losing our kids. How many more jails are we going to build? We can't jail our way out. We can't prison our way through it. We have got to come up with tangible solutions. The one thing that did not frighten me when I went to prison, that was very normal, that every household in every state need to do, and that's a shakedown. I went through shakedowns at home. My grandmother knew what was in the house, what was supposed to be in the house, what she bought, what she didn't buy, and you had to be accountable for where did this white t-shirt come from? Because she knew you only had 3. There was a blue, brown, black. So where did this white one come from? So she was going to track the system to wear that white shirt. And we need shakedown. Buki coming home with a cell phone, no job. Nobody got to tell you he's stealing. Yeah, he's stealing. Yeah, he robbing. You coming there, you watching a 12-screen TV today. Tonight, you got a 34-foot screen. Come on. Nobody tells you take. These kids know. And if you tolerating not answering about that white shirt, they're going to ease in the next big thing in the house. After a while, it's going to get out of control. And you can't live in houses afraid of children, locking your bedroom door. You got to deal with some hard stuff. You can't live in the same room because we can't keep locking it up. We got to unlock some things to unlock some things. You can't keep locking it up. You got to unlock it. We're doing it backwards. We got to do more unlocking than locking. You got to unlock your way out, not lock it out. Unlock it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah, my mother would take the posters off the walls and search the back of them.
Mhm.
I wasn't doing anything. I was like,
Pic-
what?
Picture frames, picture frames,
Right,
take the
right.
pictures out.
I was like, what? I was like, if you, she flipped the mattresses. My stepdad would go in the couches. I was like, I lead people. Anyway.
Yeah, I went through that.
So I want to address something you said earlier, and then we have a reader question, and so that'll
Okay.
probably get us out of the show as well. You mentioned the young man with cancer who was arrested in the murder of the young pregnant woman. Well, one of the kids, not kids anymore, young men, who was also arrested in that was the young man that I'm talking about who had broken into the elementary school when he was in the 3rd grade and was treated very roughly and terrified, but when they were trying to steal the computer. And that was a young man who participated that was part of this article that I put up there, the Hunger to Live article, and several others, and then participated in the youth media project that we do. So popular, so brilliant, like you're talking about how with the things that you wanted to do, and I'm heartbroken because I've worried about him ever since he left the youth media project, and this is kind of why I bring it up, is ever since he left the youth media project and in such a good place and even was getting his GED and other things, he didn't have anywhere to go but back to the streets. And I think that's what a lot of people don't quite understand is like, what is the next thing in the chain? Like, it's not like, I love this kid. I mean, I can't tell you. I've never loved a young person that we've worked with more than I love this kid. So when you were talking about that, I'm feeling it, right? I love him now, but I knew then, and what happens next? That's the thing. It's like, and I think you were talking about it when you're talking about in a number of different ways, but there has to be some sort of chain or something. There has to be a system that actually focuses in on the young kids who need it the most, because not one person or one organization can do everything. Mm-hmm. And if there's anything that I'll say is that, we don't seem to ever get organized as a city and a community to make sure that there are no holes in the net for the fairly small percentage of young people who need this the most, and who commit the worst violence. And so I want you to talk about that. Then we're also going to put this, we're going to put this question up on the screen, which is kind of about what you're doing. But first, just respond to that. And I guess the part about what we need to do as a community to make sure that young people aren't falling through the net when they start getting in trouble in 3rd grade, and what can happen, what needs to happen.
Well, I go back again to the parenting. Big mamas have, they diva mamas now. Everybody's a glam mom, diva mom. Well, all of that's good. You still need the wisdom of moral living, righteous living, in order to get these kids need the model of that. And then you got to teach a kid how to accept no. Everything is not a yes. We're living in a yes generation. Yes, you can have this. Yes, you can have that. You got to learn how to accept the no's and the wait a whiles, or not ever's even. And a lot of these kids, when you say no, they just take it. So the parenting part to me is very significant. And then the system working alongside parents. And one thing that came to mind was we got a Senate bill that's out, 2437, that creates 2 different work release programs in Mississippi. And having that work release program while the incarcerated population is locked up is good. They have two of them, two different ones. The first one, work initiative, will be housed at MPIC, Mississippi Prison Industries Corporation, which is good on paper, but the implementation is problematic. And the goal of us advocates is to avoid going back into the convict leasing. In this bill, they're required to find full-time permanent employment and to save 60% of their wages in a bank account and pay no more than 25% to child support ordered by the court, fines and to pay fines and restitution by the court. And so we need all of these systems, organizations like us, people who get stories out like Mississippi Free Press, to help deal with some of this stuff. Because us advocates believe that work relief while incarcerated is good. I know it's good. I sit there. I was sitting in prison at a time when I was doing nothing until a job came, on the inside job, not the work relief. And work release in other states is working. When it's done right, it reduces recidivism. And they have reduced recidivism where they can have full-time jobs when they release. In Mississippi, we have the same opportunity, and I bring it up now because it's on the legislative agenda now. In Mississippi, we got this same opportunity if it's done right. And the reason we're concerned about it being done the right way is because House Bill 747 has the same elements, but it removes or extends the repealer. We advocates do not believe we have enough data to reduce recidivism, and in particular this advocate, because I've been doing this work 30-something years. To date, we have zero recidivism, but yet we're not looked at or at the table as a model or one of the inclusive people in this Senate Bill 2437. So it's not enough data to produce except those with an appetite to be participant of it, and particularly the sheriff in Rankin County and other sheriffs that are being considered. The second program, which is really the tough one, is a prison industries enhancement program that allows MDOC to take 80% of currently incarcerated people's wages to use for room and board while in prison. Room and board while in prison. to help them support their families, with 20% going to convict and compensation fund, allowing the commissioner to take on 80% of currently incarcerated people's wages, which sounds like a repeat of the current restitution center, which is wrong. I've been in restitution center, got kicked out, left restitution center, me personally, after having worked, and it shut down because they're wrong. Well, you got House Bills 586 and 2275 that takes out the repealer. Taking out the repealer means there is no means for the program to ever be reviewed, be accountable, meaning they would never have to report the data in these programs that are being considered to help families. And I'm just interested in knowing, how can you take this much power and put in the hands of sheriffs who then become the judge, the jury, and the executioner, when anybody under the leadership of any sheriff's program are going to obey? Who won't obey somebody who got a gun on one side, a set of handcuffs, a billy club, a taser, keys to open a cell to lock you in, and a bulletproof vest to protect themselves and you unshielded? Who won't obey? And this is a bill that, and I'm going in all kind of directions here, but it's so many pieces of all of this where our communities have really got to come together. We talk about more jails. We don't need more jails, more prison. What are we going to do? Fence in Jackson? Fence in all these states? We do not need no more jails. No more jails. No more jails. No more prisons. You can't lock your way into this. And when they get out, they're worse than when they went in. They traumatize even more when they come out with nothing produced for them to succeed. Nothing. I know, because I'm one of them. Nothing produced for them to succeed. You can, and then they say you can't hang with the people that they made you live with for 40 years. You come out, you can't hang with them. Well, they're the only one want to be bothered with you. You're in violation if you bother them. And I'm just saying, we need to look at this stuff before the legislators in with Senate Bill 2437. It is a bad bill. No, let me say this. It's good in that we need work release. It's bad in how we're going to implement it. But the one with the commissioner, that Senate bill is a bad bill. 80% of your income to pay for room and board. Well, the state already getting paid to house me.
Right.
So I'm just saying we have got to come together. The churches got to come together. We got to do something together. We got to bring these kids, because we got victims all over the place. And I know victims are real. Crime is real, but locking people up every day, and we got to let people out. People that have done these long sentences, how much you going to pay? The crime ain't going to change. We got the parole board right now that has released a young person that was involved in killing a child that only served a certain percentage of time. But I do know that just a few days ago, this same parole board turned down a lady who is 80 years old, been locked up 34 years. 80 years old. But if you let out a young buck who was involved with some gang people that still were able not to, and I'm not saying, I'm just
no, we hear you.
The comparisons of the story.
Right.
That was involved in killing a child who couldn't help themselves. Right. You let out, you paroled them, this 80-year-old lady who gave her 5 years set off, which means she won't come back up for parole again till she's 85.
Wow.
Now, what's wrong with our system in Mississippi? And we're talking about work release and putting 80% of income of currently incarcerated people in the hand of a commissioner. You want to call it work release. No, it's not. It's convict leasing. Looked at a different way. I'm serious. We language stuff to a way that it appears up. And you're putting this kind of power in the hands of sheriff. We have got to look at what we're doing. It is wrong, people. It is wrong.
Well, I will say this to you, Ms. Rogers. I have a feeling reporter Coyote Crown is going to be in touch with you about some of what you're talking about there with the convict leasing, because that's something that we're really interested in doing more deeper on. And I will also say this whole thing about that you're saying about jails and as well as prisons is that a lot of people can come out worse criminals, as you know, because all sorts of things, because of what goes on behind bars. And so if people are thinking that those things are making society safer, the research doesn't actually back that up. So you're not just saying that, you're not just saying that, but I want everybody else to know that there's a lot behind that. And the idea of misdemeanor jails is really a problem, right?
Wrong.
And well, it's just the research, the facts on it is that it is a very dangerous practice.
Yes.
We got to get out of here because our producer is telling us, but those comments, especially at the end, you really landed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here for this conversation. We are going to keep having some conversations with you. We got you on speed dial now, so to speak, Ms. Rogers. We so appreciate you and being here today. To everybody else, thank you for watching this episode. Please share it on Facebook. It's also on YouTube. Have other people watch it. We're trying to have a long conversation about violence prevention. And by the way, we're going to have everybody's invited a virtual solution circle about violence prevention and reduction on, let's see, 2 Wednesdays from now, which is 2 Tuesdays from now, which is the 16th. And so you're going to be seeing some ads about that. It's virtual. So anyway, I don't have a graphic to put up for y'all, but watch for that. We want you in on that conversation. We call it Beyond Policing, not instead of policing, beyond policing. And so we want you in on that conversation. Also, please remember that our show next week is going to be civil rights activist Flauncey Brown Wright, who is an amazing woman that a lot of you guys know. She's a wonderful storyteller and a real keeper of Black history. And so she's going to be here talking to Kimberly and me about real facts, especially in a world that's trying to actually censor Black history these days. So that'll be a really good show. And please remember, give what you can to the Mississippi Free Press. You've helped us grow our team. We're trying to add 2 more reporters this year and beef up even more. Your funds help us do that. And also, please donate to the RECH Foundation, which is also a nonprofit, to support the work that Pauline Rogers is doing. Thank you so much for being here today, listening to Ms. Rogers. It's been fabulous to have you. Thank you again. Keep up the good work.
Thank you all. Thank you.